Everybody asks, where is the ball? Nobody asks, how is the ball? Okay, so honestly, jokes aside, I really want to touch on something I have done a lot of research on and have seen very little results. This is probably, honestly, one of the few things that you're going to hear being touched on by engineers that design the balls, that understand what's going on, versus what's really being discussed about the whole thing. What it is everybody talks on how the clubs make spin. Nobody really explains why the ball makes spin. This is going to be in regards of every single ball that you hit. So real quickly, to kind of show what my super cheesy drawing is, this is essentially just an iron hitting a ball. Don't think too much on the drawing itself. Obviously there's going to be a cover involved. This is supposed to be the mantle and the core. This is essentially representing a 3-piece and or a 2-piece ball, depending on how you want to look at it. I have a cut DC and a Top Flight Gamer just to show an actual representation of the ball itself. This is a 4-piece, this is a 3-piece. These were the easiest for me to be able to show on camera to demonstrate what I'm trying to explain. So how the ball actually makes spin is essentially the different densities and types of materials that they are. Back on one of my other videos of what cover materials there are and why does it matter, this explains that this is a urethane cover, ionomer cover. This is a DuPont ionomer mantle, as well as this. Essentially the same cover that this one has is the same thing that the mantle is. What makes that so important is the different densities of this material. Ionomer Cerlin is a resin. It's more of a plastic base than this polymer, which urethane is more rubber based. They're both essentially polymers, but that's an entire different topic that we're not going to get on. So when you hit the ball, your club is obviously going to be either in a directional across or a downward motion that's going to impact into the ground. So essentially the point of aim for this club is to hit over here in front of the ball on the ground. That's hitting down on the ball. That's how you generate compression and you generate the flight and spin off of it. Now you have two things that's in effect. So that right there, hitting down, is called your dynamic loft. You are setting the loft at impact. Now you have your static loft. Static is going to be the club. It's static because it's consistent. The loft of your club doesn't change unless you hit the club so hard that you're actually bending it in the process. 90% of golfers actually aren't going to be doing that. So when you hit down on that ball, that force is still going to travel from point A to point B. At the same exact time, you're creating a secondary force where that static loft is actually hitting the ball in a different spot with energy transfer in a different direction. One is going to be shooting up across the ball while the other one's shooting down through the ball. Why this is important is actually how the ball generates spin. This applies to any piece ball. So as you start to hit the ball and the energy starts to come through it, obviously you're going to have the point over here where it's going to be rebounding and trying to reshape. This energy is literally shooting through the ball and it has to reverberate. It's a spear. When you go and look at Newton's 3 laws, every action has an equal or opposite reaction, as well as, you know, the force acted upon is going to continue moving until it hits resistance, whatever. All this stuff literally comes into play in simple physics. So as your static loft starts to travel energy through this ball, it is going to give an upward angle on it, whereas your other one's going to give a downward angle through it. This is two different forces. That's why when you hit that compression, it's going to compress from, say, point A to point B. This part of the ball is going to flatten. That energy is being pushed through. Again, you still have that downward dynamic energy being transferred through. This is going to move through the inside of the sphere, and that's where the different materials come into play. So as the ball starts to reform and reshape, this energy needs to go somewhere. And this is actually where the spin is generated. So as it's returning back through, it's creating centrifugal force on the inside on its own. Don't mind the arrows not being perfect directions. I am trying to do this upside down to show you this, but this is the part that nobody actually really understands, or it's not really explained. So when the energy bounces off of the mantle, or if it's a two-piece ball, the cover, that resin is denser. That is going to capture energy and reverberate through it, whereas the rubber just wants to snap back to where it is, and it kind of deadens energy. That's why the compression of a golf ball being so firm matters so much when it comes into how much energy it could transfer through. That's why harder balls generate more spin, because that harder core is actually going to trap the same amount of energy. It's going to reverberate through it. Hence here in this four-piece ball, this outer core is going to essentially help this thin mantle replicate the same thing. When you go into a very thin, trying to find a quick two-piece ball. When you go into a two-piece ball, this ionomer cover is essentially replicating the same exact thing that this mantle is doing, because it's the same material. It's just a different density of it. So this is still going to generate spin on impact. This is why there's no true ball that doesn't generate spin. So again, as it starts to rebound off of this outer shell and start to return, it's not going to be in a one-way line because it's a sphere. So it's going to shoot up at an angle from your dynamic loft. And then it's also going to shoot at a different angle from your static loft. This itself will literally start to force this ball to spin, because physics says it has to take the energy and transfer it somewhere. That's why the mantle matters so much in a three-piece ball. When you get into like the Bridgestone E6, which is a three-piece ball that's supposed to be a straighter flight, this mantle layer is actually going to be a softer material to help disperse the energy different, so it actually deadens the spin. This energy is going to be lost. It's the same concept of trying to make something bullet resistant. You don't want the hardest material that's out there. Yeah, steel is going to definitely hold up a lot better when it comes to the stopping of the transfer of energy. They actually use softer steels. That's where the ceramic comes into play, because you want something that's soft and powders. Most ballistic glass actually is just your standard annealed glass, like your windshield, with extra layers of plastic glass, because it wants that energy to disperse and stop. So the E6 uses a softer mantle to go and deaden that energy transfer through it. This is actually why every single ball is going to generate spin. When you get that spin in action, if there was, say, no dimples, you're still going to actually get a good amount of spin. You're going to lose out on the flight characteristics. The dimples create air resistance that give it lift. I really wanted to do a lot more on explaining this, but this is just a quick rundown on how the ball itself actually generates spin. If this actually was informative or something that you did or didn't know, please leave a comment down below. I would love to hear back what you think of it, because I honestly am shocked that this really isn't discussed anymore. Please like and subscribe if you want to see content like this. Words are hard. And like and subscribe to follow me for more content like this. I have so much more information and knowledge that I can share. Keep it in the fairway. Have a good one.